One of the things not to be overlooked, you may deal with it later in the broadcast for all I know, is that Attorney General Sessions is now a marked man. That Comey today kind of got overlooked in everything that came out.
100%.
But he put, if you will, he put a dagger pretty near the heart of Sessions.
That is Dan Rather's assessment that the FBI's investigation seems to be heading toward Attorney General Jeff Sessions is based not on what James Comey said in public yesterday, but more on what he could not say, which is something Comey appeared to be hinting at yesterday when Senator Ron Wyden asked him why he decided to keep Sessions, who was the Attorney General, in the dark about his interactions with the president.
Our judgment, as I recall, was that he was very close to and inevitably going to recuse himself for a variety of reasons. We also were aware of facts that I can't discuss in an open setting that would make his continued engagement in a Russia-related investigation problematic.
In a closed-door meeting with senators that followed, according to reporting, Comey confirmed that he had been talking about a story about classified intelligence suggesting an undisclosed meeting between Sessions and the Russian ambassador in April-May 2016 at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington. Now, although Sessions said during his confirmation hearing he had no meetings with Russians during the campaign under oath, and later had to change his testimony when the Washington Post reported in March that Sessions met with the Russian envoy twice last year, the Justice Department spokesperson maintains, quote, the facts haven't changed. The then senator did not have any private or side conversations with any Russian officials at the Mayflower Hotel. Joining me now, Naveed Jamali, a former FBI double agent and MSNBC contributor. Naveed, the Sessions, this question of Sessions' possible third meeting, which is the contested third meeting, there's been folks suggesting that people think that there's intelligence suggesting it might have happened. Sessions denies it. What do you make of it?
I think, every pun intended, it's odd that they would keep referring to discuss this in closed sessions. There must be something there. I mean, it's clear. We've heard about this Mayflower, alleged Mayflower meeting. This was when President Trump had his foreign policy, I'm sorry, at the time, candidate Trump had his foreign policy discussion at this Center for National Interest, and the ambassador was there. So there was a discussion, and there's a theory that perhaps there was a longer discussion between Mr. Sessions and perhaps even Mr. Kushner. So this is at the heart of it, I think, what we're discussing here.
Yeah, and I keep coming back to this, and this is, to me, this is the core set of facts that I am the most focused on right now, and I want to get your feedback on it. There are three individuals who are not the President of the United States who have all, under penalty of perjury, lied, deceived, not told the truth, omitted meetings with Russian officials. Flynn lied to FBI investigators, which is a big no-no. This is a guy who presumably knows better about his conversations with Kislyak on Sanctions Day. He also lied to people in the White House, but lied under, you can be indicted for that. People have been. Sessions lies under oath in front of the Senate about meeting with Kislyak. Jared Kushner omits a very memorable secret meeting with Kislyak where they talked about setting up a back channel from his form, a form you filled out, I know, that under penalty of perjury you cannot omit things. What are we to make of this?
Well, that is the big question. And I think there's two ways to look at this. And it's important to remember, Comey submitted this letter before he actually testified. And one of the interesting parts there was he discusses a little bit about what the FBI's role is in terms of counterintelligence. And their primary role is to understand, detect foreign threats, and sometimes they prosecute. So the reason I say that is when you fill out this form, part of the thing that they say on this SF-86 is that the information there can be used for counterintelligence investigation. Now, from a legal standpoint, we've gone down this road quite a bit. The question of if they knowingly intended to mislead an investigator, that becomes a crime. Now, that's a pretty wide swath, right? Well, someone can make an honest mistake, but what you're seeing here, Chris, as you mentioned, is a pattern where there's not just one person who's forgetting to do this once, you have three people who are forgetting to do this multiple times. That is a pattern that is highly suspect, I have to say.
As someone who worked as a double agent of the FBI in counterintelligence, if someone presented to you this about someone, that they omitted a meeting, for instance, in Kushner's case with the ambassador, that was a secret meeting, and they just didn't put it on the security clearance form, like, that would pique your suspicion, right?
Absolutely, and I've said this before, the process is that they will come back to you and say, okay, there's did you mean to do this? And if you answered it wrong or you admitted it, let's amend it, and you have to give me a justification as to why you answered it wrong or omitted this. And there has to be a clear, reasonable, logical explanation. So far, I don't know if that's happened. I don't know if investigators have actually had that conversation, and they perhaps in that discussion, if you present an answer that doesn't make sense, it gets forwarded on to the next step. And this is at the core of it, the investigative part. But Chris, the other part of this is, what were the Russians trying to do? I mean, clearly we have this angle of Trump, but the Russians were clearly trying to do something. We know they're trying to interfere with our elections. What were they trying to do with these meetings? I mean, it makes you wonder. I mean, it's a question to ask.
To bring it back around, this meeting that is denied by Sessions, the possibility of one existing, it's very important to establish whether that did or did not happen. We'll be looking for that. Naveed Jamali, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chris.
Coming up, using Comey Day to block out the sun, how Senate Republicans are using Trump's Russia problems to advance Trump care in a completely unprecedented fashion. Plus, the other election night surprise, what happened immediately after this picture was